All right, so the work we're going to do here in Module 3B is the work of analyzing state and local politics here in Nevada, with a particular focus on Nevada fiscal politics, the politics of tax and spend, which is actually, I think, more interesting and relevant than you might imagine. So we're going to talk about, in addition to some broad observations about state and local politics, we're going to talk about how Nevada, at the state level, raises revenue each two-year budget cycle, and then how they spend that money, and we're also going to talk about how local governments generate revenue and how they spend that revenue. All right? Okay. So, local governments. And this is generically true of local governments across the country, and then specifically true, I guess, about local governments in Nevada. One, we know that local governments are considered to be creatures of the state, right? The state creates them. What is it they say? I brought you into this world and I can take you out. I wouldn't go quite that far with local governments and the state, but generally true, yeah, right? States create local governments and then have certainly the upper hand over local government. Local governments, right, have no constitutional standing in the United States Constitution. They're not mentioned at all. I think we've talked about that. But they do have standing, of course, under all 50 state constitutions, including the one here in Nevada. The general relationship between state and local government is governed by what's known as Dillon's rule. This means that, kind of like at the federal level, the same thing, we talked about that when there's a conflict between state policy and local policy, generally state policy will prevail. As long as the state's, behaving in ways that are legally correct. So, yeah, that's Dillon's rule. That states have the upper hand over local governments. So it doesn't mean that they can do anything they want. Local governments have real power, but all things being equal, yeah, states are more powerful than local governments. Just like the feds, right, are more powerful than state governments. Local governments here in Nevada and elsewhere, very politically significant. An awful lot of action, right, is at the local level. If you want to talk about K through 12 public education, you need to talk about local politics. If you want to talk about law enforcement issues, you're going to be talking about local politics. You're going to talk about healthcare policy. A lot of that is done locally, or housing for the disadvantaged, the homeless issue. All sorts of issues are driven largely by local governments. So there's a lot of action there. Examples of local governments, counties here, of course, right, it would be Clark County. Cities, here we would have what? North Las Vegas, City of Henderson. Those, by the way, are our three biggest cities here in Nevada. Reno has now dropped down to fourth. So I think it goes, Las Vegas is the biggest city in the state, Henderson is second, North Las Vegas is third, and Reno is fourth, at least the last I heard. We also have towns and villages and so forth. And we have some jurisdictions here that are kind of, I would call them nominal jurisdictions. People will often say, well, the Las Vegas Strip is located in Paradise. Well, much of it is, that's true. And you're like, what the hell's Paradise? It's a non-governing political jurisdiction. They don't have, there's no Paradise City Council. There's no mayor of Paradise. Paradise doesn't have tax policies and so forth. It's kind of a nominal designation. It kind of bugs the heck out of me. So who actually governs the Las Vegas Strip? Turns out it's Clark County. Clark County there. Yeah, the operational jurisdictions are the ones I just mentioned, right? North Las Vegas, City of Henderson, here in the valley. Arguably, in fact, I think certainly the most important governing entity here in the valley would be Clark County. They do derive an awful lot of revenue off of the Strip in terms of property taxes and so forth. So that's why Clark County is so well funded and employs so many people. is that they draw their revenue mostly from the Strip. City of Las Vegas, right? Much smaller budget because they don't govern the Strip at all. They govern downtown Las Vegas, which is an okay source of revenue, but it doesn't rival the Strip. Yeah. So Clark County is where an awful lot of the action is politically and economically in Nevada and in the Las Vegas Valley. Can't even tell you how important Clark County is. Then also kind of a regional entity is quite significant for the state and in the valley, the Southern Nevada Water Authority. I know some of you are doing your papers on water issues of scarcity and so forth. Well, you're going to need to talk about SNWA. They have a huge impact on water policy in Nevada in general and in the Las Vegas Valley in particular. Very powerful agency. Headed up for a long time by the legendary Pat Mulroy. And now I think it was her second in command. I think it's Mike Ensminger or something like that. He's now at the head of SNWA. All right. Alrighty, so speaking sort of broadly here about state finances here in Nevada, we do have a biennial budget process, which is pretty weird. Every 2 years, we create a 2-year budget in which we have to anticipate revenue in both year 1 and year 2 of that cycle. And we need to anticipate spending in both year 1 of that cycle and year 2. As an accounting matter, that's not optimal. Because oftentimes, right, you don't know exactly what your revenue is going to be like in year 2 because that's projecting into the future. And you're not so sure about what your spending is going to be in year 2 of the cycle. You're trying to predict the future. Maybe we'll have a recession. Maybe there'll be a COVID lockdown. All sorts of things come up that you don't expect. So why do we have a suboptimal biennial process for our budget? Because we have a biennial legislature that only meets once every 2 years for 4 months. So that's why we have a biennial budget. This is kind of, I think, a hangover of when we were a much smaller, more rural state, where we had part-time legislators only meeting for a few months every 2 years. And today, right, we're about 3.2, 3.3 million people. And here in the Valley, it's about 2.2, 2.3 million. Some would say that we're a little more complex now than we used to be, a lot more stuff going on, more issues come up. We probably should have a legislature that meets once a year, and we should probably have an annual budget like other states do for the most part. All that being said, look, Texas, right, one of our biggest states, of course, they have a biennial legislature and a biennial budget, so it can be done. So what does Nevada rely upon? We'll look at this in a little more detail in the next slide. We rely mostly on the sales tax. Well, not mostly, but the single largest source of revenue here in Nevada is the sales tax. It's not the gaming tax. That's been shifting over the years, where gaming is a smaller and smaller percentage of the state revenue budget, and the sales tax has moved up into top place by quite a bit. And then it's gaming, and then it's the 2 corporate taxes if you combine them, and then a host of other sources that we go into on the next slide. What doesn't constitute much revenue in Nevada is the mining tax. That always kind of makes me angry. We mine a lot of gold here in Nevada up north, and they don't pay, I think, their fair share. It's still in the Constitution. What is it? 5% of net revenue, net profit. That ain't much. May seem like a lot back in 1864, but it's the year 2026, people. It's not getting it done. And that's probably a north-south thing, right? Where the South feels like we pay our fair share. Up north, you're not really paying your fair share. As a Southern Nevadan, that's certainly how I feel. The legislature some years ago did do an add-on mining tax that made it a little higher. But that's something I think we're still trying to come to grips with. But the mining industry here is politically powerful, so it's been tough to change that. Um, the next frontier in mining here in Nevada is going to be lithium, right? Lithium, which is part of the new green economy. Electric batteries, they use a lot of lithium. Cell phones use lithium. And we have a lot of it up north, and most states don't have any that we know of. So that's going to be a big deal. I think there's going to be a lithium mining boom up north, and I hope we get the mining tax higher by then, because I think those industries, they should pay their fair share. That's my own view. Hotel room taxes, significant. All right, that's how it turns out. We are helping to fund Allegiant Stadium. We're paying back that money that we gave to Mark Davis to bring the Raiders here and help build the stadium. We're paying him. We're paying investors who bought that debt through a hyped, raised hotel room tax, mostly on the Strip, but across the entire valley to some degree. All right, well, let's look at a little more detail through some pie charts in the next two slides. All right, so this pie chart and additional data below that chart, it's not coming up as clearly as I would like, so I'll sort of guide you through it here quickly. So this is the state of Nevada, and these are state taxes, state revenue. We'll see that local taxes, local revenue, local spending, those are sort of overlapped with state stuff, but pretty separate for the most part. It's complicated. This is state revenue, state taxes. The sales tax is the big one, right? That's the biggest piece of the pie there. About 30% of our revenue comes from the sales tax. It's around 8 1/3%. The second biggest piece of pie there is the gaming tax. That generates about 16% of our revenue. I think the rate of the gaming tax for gaming companies is 6% of gross revenue. But the percentage it makes up of our budget, of our revenue, is 16%. All right, so that's nearly half of our revenue comes from a combination of the sales tax, the big one. People are often surprised by that. They think it's going to be the gaming tax. It's not. Then the gaming tax. And then, again, always these things get a little tricky. You got there the modified business tax, which is just shy of 14%, and the commerce tax, 6%. I tend to think of those as sort of combined as a form of a corporate tax here in Nevada. Technically, we don't have a corporate income tax, but we kind of do. Because you combine those two categories, which I think they should be combined, that's about 20%. So when you combine it, that makes up more than the gaming tax, but only when you combine it. The insurance premium taxes, that's interesting. So the insurance premiums that all of us pay, including not just private individuals, homeowners, apartment dwellers perhaps, corporations, small businesses, all of us who pay insurance here, auto insurance, I assume, that's actually a pretty big chunk of the pie. That gets pretty technical. I don't know a lot about that tax, but it's significant statewide. And then a host of other taxes. Gosh, the mining tax, that piece of the pie is so small it doesn't even show up here. Don't get me started on that. I think we get way too little revenue from mining, which is mostly up north, and it's mostly gold. Although increasingly that'll be lithium. Just a host of other taxes, cigarette tax, business license fees, the liquor tax, live entertainment tax, transportation connection excise, whatever that is. Just a host of other categories, including non-tax revenue, right? That I assume would be things like the amount we might pay each year to register our automobile, renew our license, that sort of fishing licenses, hunting licenses, all those things. All right, so hopefully that helps you sort of understand in broad outline how the state of Nevada generates revenue. We don't have an income tax. That's true. But we do have lots of other taxes because you got to get taxes from somewhere. So if we're not going to have an income tax, right, we're going to have other taxes to fill the void. People will say sometimes Nevada doesn't have a tax. And what they mean is it doesn't have an income tax. But we have a pretty big sales tax, significant gaming tax, pretty significant corporate taxes. Because, you got to raise the money. You got bills to pay here. All right, so we've looked at how the state of Nevada raises revenue. How does it spend that revenue? Same problem as before. The visual here isn't as clear as I would like it to be. You can sort of make it out, sort of. The biggest chunk of spending here in Nevada, and I think this is common for all states, health and human services overwhelmingly is what we spend our money on. Health and human services. An array of health and human services for we the people of Nevada. 36% of state spending goes to health and human services. K through 12 education gets nearly as much in terms of spend. 31.4% of our budget goes for K through 12. That's a bit unusual. Most states get most of their revenue for K through 12 from local taxes spent by local governments through property taxes. Our property taxes here are super low, so they don't generate much revenue. So most of our funding for public education, K through 12, comes from state taxes, mostly the sales tax. So that's unusual for that piece of the pie to be so large for a state, but it is the case here in Nevada. And once again, right, we love our low property taxes, but you're going to have to raise that money somewhere, so it tends to fall on the state sales tax. The third biggest piece of that spending pie, higher education, that would be CSN, UNLV, UNR, Truckee Meadows, Nevada State, on and on. After that, the next biggest chunk is public safety. That would be law enforcement, firefighting, that sort of thing. And after that, the pieces of the pie get quite small. So again, right, the big ones, health and human services, K through 12 public education, higher education, and public safety. Overwhelmingly, that's what Nevada spends its revenue on each year. Okay, so as I've suggested, we need to think of state revenue and state spending as largely separate from local revenue generation and local spending patterns. All right. So what's the most important local tax? Overwhelmingly, across the country, it's property taxes, right? They are remarkably low here in Nevada, and as a homeowner, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I used to live in Wisconsin, where the property taxes are many multiples of what they are here in terms of rate. Pretty onerous in some ways. Wisconsin has some of the highest property taxes in the country. Nevada has some of the lowest in the country. To me, coming from Wisconsin, they are shockingly low, which is, hey, great for me as a homeowner. But it means, right, that it doesn't provide much revenue for K through 12 public education, which in most of the country, that's how you primarily fund K through 12, is through local property taxes. Property taxes help to fund K through 12 here, but overwhelmingly that revenue comes, right, as we talked about, from the state sales tax. We do have a ceiling on how much they can go up in any given year. That was because in the boom years of the early 2000s, someone's property value might go up by 50%. True story. I think that was the biggest jump in 1 year on average here in the Valley. Right, and so your property taxes would go up 50% in a year, and that could be a little shocking for people because they weren't necessarily doing better economically in terms of income, just that the value of their property went up. So the legislature said, okay, the max we're going to allow it to go up in any given year is something like 4%. So they've capped that, which is probably a good thing, although it has limited revenue for local governments. Yeah, and it turns out, right, we have a consolidated K through 12 school system here in the Valley. That's pretty unusual. I grew up back east where school districts would be much smaller, much more local, which has both strengths and weaknesses, by the way. We have what's called a consolidated school district, Clark County School District. And then they get most of their revenue, of course, from the sales tax. Those property taxes help to pay for, as well, public safety, like Las Vegas Metro, North Las Vegas Police Department, City of Henderson Police Department, City of Las Vegas Police Department, on and on. Firefighters, Parks and Recreation. Parks and Rec gets like last bite at the apple, so they tend to get the smallest piece of that pie. I'll come back to that in just a moment. And it's also true, right, that both state and local governments raise revenue in other ways. Some call them stealth taxes because they seem a lot like a tax, but technically they're not. Parking tickets, parking fees increasingly. I live near the Arts District. Parking has gotten a little pricey in the Arts District. That's another way to raise revenue at the local level. Speeding tickets, state or local. That's a way to raise revenue. It's true. The tuition and student fees that one might pay in higher ed here, that's another way to raise revenue for the state. Hunting licenses, fishing licenses, fees to use park facilities, soccer fields, lots of other ways to raise revenue, and that also is significant at both the state and the local level. So here we see the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act, which has been super fantastic for the good people of Nevada. This was an effort led by, at the time, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid from Nevada, obviously. He pushed this through and got it signed into law. This basically means that all federal land auctioned off in Nevada, which is federal land, right? So that's federal revenue that should be going for federal purposes. That money actually comes right back into Nevada. And it's designated for use for parks and recreation. And, state parks, local parks, all of that, for the construction, capital investment. Because every year, the Bureau of Land Management, on behalf of the federal government, auctions off land to developers here in the Las Vegas Valley, up north around Reno. And that land, can have a pretty high value to developers. And as they auction off that land, those revenues come right back to Nevada and are invested in building parks. That's, I think, unique. It's a remarkable thing. Typically, if you want to build a local or state park, that's got to come from state or local money. Here it comes from the federal government. So thank you, Harry Reid, for that little dealio. Much appreciated.